Hi, my name's Miss Danda and I'm here with,
Mr. Amal.
and today we're going to be looking at the poem Neutral Tones. So, if we start off, Mr. Amma, by just explaining what you think Neutral Tones is about.
As you can tell, Neutral Tones is a poem about what seems like a failed relationship and the after effects of the failed relationship. Seemingly, the narrator has lost all colour, joy, and feeling post the relationship ending and is left with this feeling of greyish and bitter and all the negative emotions that are normally assumed with a breakup, but it is so deep and so effective in his mannerisms and his behaviour that he's only feel like he's vented it through the poem and also the title.
Yeah, also, you have to say that Thomas Hardy, the poet, he's known for his pessimistic tone in his poems. So, he's known for seeing things on sort of the more negative side. So, in this case, I feel like in the poem, he wants to express his pain and loss for love and how painful love can be at sometimes.
Yeah, it's also well known that he suffered quite a few of his own personal relationships ended quite negatively. And maybe a combination of failed relationship after failed relationship has said, like you said earlier on, led to this pessimistic attitude that sort of translated from his mind into poetry. We don't know whether this is specifically based on a failed relationship, but he is open to interpretation based on his prior failures.
Yeah, and we can tell because the tone we get from this poem as well is like there's a lot of hurt and lost and sort of loneliness as well in this poem.
Yeah, you definitely get this sense that he's very pensive. He's still in deep thought about what happened. If you look at the first stanza, we stood by a pond that winter day. Naturally, with the title being called neutral and with lack of colour,
Yeah.
and then we've got this reference to winter, which really sets the mood of the poem. This cold and absence of life.
I agree.
Yeah, so like for example, happiness is something that I associate with summer, if you're talking about pathetic fallacy. And winter for me is often associated with maybe death,
Yeah.
maybe coldness, maybe the person is cold towards him physically, or maybe even internally he doesn't feel the same emotions that he once had.
Yeah. Also, the second line it says the sun was white, sort of implying that the sun lacked life and light. Because normally the sun you'd say is bright yellow and it's shining, but in this case it's just white, as if it lacks life, and as though children of God. I feel like this simile represents that even the sun, which is a symbol of hope, even that's been sent away. So there's no sun, there's no hope in his relationship and how he feels for this person.
Yeah, because one of the things that a lot of people do, including myself, is I like to observe nature and its beauty, and that almost reminisces in myself emotionally appreciating the world around us. But even the normal, beautiful nature can't really evoke a sense of feeling within this narrator. Like you said, the sun has now become white. It's almost lost its essence, its focus in life. Maybe we can relate to the narrator itself losing his own focus, his own brightness, his own direction.
Yeah.
We can also think of it in a biological aspect, in the fact that the sun radiation creates photosynthesis, and then that in essence causes life in plants, releasing oxygen for us. But if the sun is white, then maybe it's implying that his life has been stopped. There's a cycle that's been ended, and
Yeah.
now he just feels, like earlier said, winter, this overwhelming feeling of this bitterness and sadness that can correlate to death, in essence.
I agree. In this case, he's reflecting that sort of bitterness and that into his like how his relationship was. I feel like when it says over tedious riddles, the word riddles is quite interesting because riddles is not you normally link to a sort of game, some sort of fun you try to have with someone. So in this case, it's as if he's trying to say love should be playful, but in his relationship, because he's describing it as being tedious, the riddles, the games aren't as fun. They're a lot more serious, a lot more negative. And he repeats the word eyes quite a lot. And I feel like that's really interesting to repeat your eyes on me as eyes that rove. Because the eyes are quite a romantic feature to point out, I think. Do you agree?
It's quite an intimate feature to point out, because if your eyes are on me and my eyes are on you, it creates this sense of closeness.
Yeah.
If you have that physical eye-to-eye connection. And also you can maybe make interpretation that the eyes are the windows of their soul. So maybe at one point they felt so connected with each other, but he can't really comprehend now losing that relationship, that he feels like he can't even look at the world in the same way. He's lost that soul connection.
And it's almost as if like their eyes aren't on each other anymore because the relationship's gone down and it's become more so negative. Their eyes, they don't have that love anymore. They don't have that connection between them. Also, I feel like the quote, "the smile on your mouth was the deadest thing," I think that's quite interesting because it's sort of like juxtaposing each other there. A smile and the deadest things. When you see a smile, you think of happiness and joyfulness. A smile is normally a positive thing, but to be the deadest thing shows that her smile looked as if she had no emotion, almost like she was being fake in their relationship. So it's almost as if he sees through her, if you get what I'm saying. So he sees through the facade that she was putting up.
Yeah, it's quite relevant, that point, because just in the line afterwards, it's alive enough to have strength to die. So it could be implying that the smile was a fake to keep the relationship, but it was fake enough for him to realize that the relationship was in essence dying.
Yeah.
And it's quite important to note that when you go from such intense intimacy to now having that person that you rely on for that intimacy to fake it, you almost have that doubt on what is real anymore, what is the point of a lot of things. And you can really feel in his vocab and his descriptions that he is still contemplating and understanding where it's gone wrong, and he again repeatedly mentioning the fact that he's metaphorically died inside.
Do you feel like he still wants to keep her? He wants her back?
Of course, because he's still feeling this grin of bitterness.
Yeah, because I feel like if you break up with someone and you don't care, you wouldn't still have these strong negative feelings towards them, this feeling of hurt, and it's almost like he's sort of scared to be alone and scared to be without her. It shows how important this relationship was to him.
Yeah, and you feel like at the end of the poem, the final stanza, where it says, "Since then, keen lessons that love deceives," you can really feel that there's this like clear juxtaposing at the beginning of the poem and at the end of the poem. "We stood by a pond." If you just look at that in its essence, it's quite a romantic feeling. And now he's at the end of the poem, "Since then," and the comma, the break, could also reflect that he's been thinking about this quite often. Keen lessons that love deceives. So he's learned that love is something that isn't supposed to give joy, it's deceptive. For him, his personal relationship, we can talk about Tom Hardy, he's become so pessimistic that he can't understand the value of love.
And I feel like the word keen is such a strong word. It's very specific. These keen lessons, these lessons that he sort of almost had to learn in order to move on with his relationships. And also, and a pond is on the last line, and we start with a pond as well. So this cyclical structure, we've ended where we began. And not only are we at a pond, but it says, "and a pond edge with greyish leaves." It's still sort of linked to that winter sort of atmosphere there. The greyish leaves, the colour grey, quite dull, quite depressing. We end up back in the same spot. It's almost as if he hasn't evolved yet and he hasn't got over her.
He clearly started off in pain and he's still ending in pain, but he's trying to take some satisfaction that he's learned from his pain.
Yeah.
That he's never going to love again. The cycle of pessimistic, of hatred, of deception, of bitterness is going to continue for the rest of his life. So his cycle of life is not going to include joy anymore. It's going to only include bitterness.
You can also tell that Thomas Hardy is writing from an experience because the imagery in this poem is so clear. The sort of things he says, so like an ominous bird, a wing. These things are, you can imagine just a reader thinking about that and imagining it in their head and putting themselves in this poet's shoes. It's very clear. And in terms of critics, what critics do you think we could possibly...
I would definitely make a link to Sigmund Freud. It's quite important to know that the id is the part of the mind which is associated with desire.
Yeah.
And I feel like his mind has become warped by the experience that he doesn't have the desire to have love anymore. You can see from the last punctuation in John Caesura of leave, next to leave, the full stop, can highlight that this is it, full stop, love is done. Like he's gone through, he's reflected, and the cycle of hatred is finished. Like it's done. He's not gonna love anymore. He's finished with the thought of greyish leaves that he accepted, even though physically he wrote the poem Neutral Tones. Maybe it's a metaphor for his life that he's always going to be neutral. He's never going to see colours again. He's never going to experience anything again. And you can feel like the full stop is quite powerful because he's now stopped that element of emotion within his life.
I think he uses punctuation really well here because there's also an ellipsis in the poem as well, which sort of represents a time that went on so it's almost like they were in this relationship. He knew that it wasn't really that strong, and it went on for quite some time until it ended. But I just also want to point out the rhyme scheme. So it's an ABBA rhyme scheme, and I feel like it's such a nice flow throughout the poem. You're so interested in the imagery and in all these different things he's picking out, all these emotions he's pulling out from his readers, and the poem's a really nice read. Like you said, when you get to that final full stop and it has that cyclical structure, you sort of see his attempt to evolve, but when really he ends up back in the same spot. But I think overall, Neutral Tones, Thomas Hardy really does reflect his feelings. We get a real hurt tone and atmosphere, and the theme of loss and loss of love, and also the desire to have love. So I think we'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, if we were going to compare it to another poem, I would say if you just focus on the theme of relationship, this poem is quite accessible to a range of poems, focusing on, for example, maybe even you can even make a link to Farmer's Bride, the fact that there's this lack of love and interest in someone's life that's leading them to do something completely out of the ordinary.
I think that's the key theme, the sort of the lack of love and wanting it.
Yeah, definitely unrequited love. 100% unrequited love. We can leave it here. This poem is a great poem if you want to find and talk about the topic of unrequited love and the failures of a relationship. As always, we will have a podcast up for the next poem. Just make sure that you are revising in your own time, and
thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.